flow, and that's where the 20% margin. So you're right, I should be more clear. I haven't been clear. It's like a very conceptual one, and then during SD, you're kind of creating your first real one. But then as you get to DD, the whole process at DD, when I'm trying to bring developers and architects, we're like, okay, this is where we're taking it out of placeholders and starting to put in real values. And the challenge is, many teams don't actually draw drawings until the construction drawings. That's what it says to do in the AIA guide, right? And if you're an architecture firm that has already done a Passivhaus, you already have a library of drawings, so it's not a big deal. But if this is your first and you have to develop 20 brand new details, you need to get started earlier. You're just not going to make it if you don't.
Can I make a point on that? This is a bone of contention I had for many years, and I don't have a solution, but we need to seriously put our heads together. How do we get details that are not already developed and tested in the field across numerous architect firms? And instead of every new firm that's coming to Passivhaus reinventing the wheel, how do we get those shared in some database? Like I keep raising this, and we have the odd talk about it, but we say that's a serious challenge we need to. If we want to scale this, we can't be starting from ground zero on every project.
How is the Passivhaus Institute Thermal Bridge online guide developing?
The catalog has been online, but I don't think it's exactly what you want there.
Last time I checked, it was mostly concrete.
I think it has to be initiated by us. PHI's got a global perspective,
There are
right?
already several catalogs out there. I think the first, a little thing would be start checking what other people have already done, even if they're not from exactly the same construction system.
Yeah, totally. And
So it's not only from PHI, it's from many other people.
There's a massive, amazing resource that nobody is really utilizing properly. It's the IBO, the Austrian Ecological Law, and it's an incredible database with embodied carbon and thermal bridging. And I use those details in my projects in California. And they've got a retrofit catalog. There's an online platform you can actually utilize the details, and they adjust by climate by literally minimizing the amount of insulation you need. And they scale.
You send me a link about that, and will you put in the notes?
Is it all construction types, Brendan?
All construction types, wood, masonry, retrofit. It's an incredible depth, and our community just really, it's sort of like this gold mine sitting out there that nobody's tapped yet.
Put the
Is that
link
the
in
same
there.
thing that the two books that they?
Great.
So I have those books. I flipped through them and I didn't feel like they were that.
A lot of them aren't Passivhaus, but let's not get too bogged down there. Will you put that in the notes? I'll bring back in the other problem. The second one of those is just remind Monte to call Neil about the BC Hydro database. There's a database that was started in British Columbia with great details. And sorry, there's this database that was started in BC with great details and was specifically created a separate entry form where we could start putting in Passivhaus details. But then the funding ran out, and the person who was doing it at Marsh & Hirschfield moved to RDH, and the project's kind of stalled. So we need to go back to that and see where that's at, and see that can but that's another discussion I'm not going to try to do here.
I think he's still moving forward with that, and I think that MH as well is trying to put more details into
I just
that.
haven't talked to Neil in 6 months. So.
Yeah, no, but I'm saying even MH as well, because they're presenting other things that they're trying to add.
I don't know why I didn't put it in this draft. We'll put
Yeah.
both of these. We're going to list a series of resources, but back to the architects. The other thing that's been my frustration is more than once, RDH offered to sell a whole package of details to architects. And they would say, wow, $20,000 for the detail, that's crazy, that's too much money. And then they spent $100,000 drawing their own, and we had to review them for another $50,000. It's like, so there's a weird resistance of architects to buy details that I don't fully understand. If I could get them to just buy packages, I would do it. And maybe we have to get them free online that they can riff from. The good news is, there's the really good news. This is only a project for first-time projects. By the time the architect is their second, they've got 80% of them done. By the time the third, they've got 90% of them done. By the time you have a whole city who's done them, people have moved from firm to firm and stolen the details and taken them from firm to firm, you know? So this goes away, but it is a real issue at the start, and I'm raising it because of the timeline thing. But it does go away. It's really gone away in Vancouver. It really does go away. And the hilarious thing is when you can tell who stole from what and you don't tell bosses. Okay. So I'm just explaining here, I'm explaining the guide. Why, what the fuck, why am I doing construction drawings in the beginning of design development? And am I going to get in trouble with AIA because I'm, not charging the right time for this? So you've got to conceive, draw the detail, revise it. You need the enclosure engineer to revise it. You need to model it with Flixo or some other appropriate software and revise it. You need to have a second round of feedback to go through this. It's not something the young associate can do on a Sunday night for Monday delivery. It takes weeks of review. And if it's not thought about, and you don't start this for construction drawings, you are not going to hit your deadlines. CD is going to stretch out, everybody's going to be pissed off, they're all going to blame the architect and Passivhaus consultant, but it was all foreseeable. And that's all I'm trying to say in this guide, is like, if this is your first time, see the detail problem. Now, if you buy panels from people like these people, that are all made, guess what they sell you? The detail. It's been modeled, it's all those pieces, so huge jump if you buy a panelized constructive system, you can get over that. And that's why a lot of the first round of buildings in Pennsylvania were built smart, because it's not the world's best system, but it was available, it was there, it was like training wheels, you know? So, okay. I'm just trying to make people aware of the timing, but I really like your suggested run, and we're gonna build on that, probably with an appendix too. And then the other thing is, so we're in DD, we need to identify our basic design windows and ventilation system, and down to actual manufacture. And pre-tendering is possible, depending on how this thing is going. It makes a lot of sense to pre-tender, but if not, at least it's gonna be this model or equal or better with these specs. And then as people are looking at it, at least the building can move forward then, rather than constantly backing up because we changed the window, or because we changed the HRV. Yes?
Yeah, it could be worth at this stage, given all the funny things that happen in the construction industry, is maybe we can get a sense of lead times on your preferred products.
Yeah, lead times is really good too, especially. Window lead times have gone up and down over the last 10 years.
HRVs as well.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, we're getting a big one, right? And then, to your point, you know, as design development comes, and we now have specifics on a bunch of these pieces, and we probably have specifics for more than half those inputs that were all guesses earlier, this PHPP needs to go to the certifier, needs to be really talked through, needs to be vetted. It's based on actual details of components, and at that point, I'm suggesting like a 10% buffer. The buffers come down because we know it's real at this point. Things can change. Go ahead.
I thought it interesting that I don't know if it's the case, that you wait till the end of DD to prepare your second model and you're not modeling throughout.
It depends on the firm you're working with and how it goes and how many what ifs they want to go through. You know, if they want to keep saying what if, you've got a model as you go out. I'm going to come to you, yeah. You know, in reality, thank you, I need to clarify this. I put this at the end of the D, but in reality, I do this as soon as I have enough information of a meaningful model. As soon as they got some details to model, we've picked an ERV, we've picked one, as soon as there's enough there that I think, yeah, that model will mean something, you should do it. That should happen near the end of DD. We have a lot of projects these days, to be honest with you, that are just billing for DD because they need the cash flow, but they haven't really even finished DD. They move into CD and they haven't done the things in the AI list that says it's DD, but the architect needs to make payroll. So they call it done and move to the next piece.
Maybe we're just not working on the repeatable buildings. Our buildings are very different enough that we're finding we need to model to inform the design throughout the design phase, right? Not just at the end.
Keep doing it in real time.
I think we just, it's too much money.
Yeah,
It's
that's
just
just
too much
never.
money, and we wouldn't be able to handle as many projects as we do. We wouldn't be able to turn around the models. When is that done? When is that stage? Where do I say, here's your updated model? Right, so we do 100% DD, 50% CD, 100% CD,
Please
and
send
then
us,
anything after that
send me one of
is
your
ad
proposals.
services. Any changes to geometry, window sizes, things like that, floor plate, after 100%, no, after 100%.
Can I ask each of you, by the way, to send me a proposal, blank proposal, just, oh my God, I'm done with, you think is a good one, how process how to go, and I'll look at that as I'm writing this next piece.
It's just too much money, too much time.
Yeah.
And Monte, exactly to Lois' point, she says there's not enough time and money. That's true. So what we've been doing is focusing the team, because 50%, 100% DD, CD, whatever, it means completely different things to different teams. So what we've been doing instead is telling them, focus on like on items that impact passive house
Yeah.
and draw them for the first 50%,
Yeah.
then do the rest while I model. And actually, you don't need to update all the time. You're just focusing your team, but you need to have a proper discussion about which detail, like, you know, I mean, what do I mean by a 50%
Let me just
package?
say, clear that for Bronwyn clearly. So we don't care if you're changing the parquet floors, because it's not gonna affect everything. We don't care if you're changing interiors. We don't care if you're changing, you know, drywall contractors. There's lots and lots of things that do change for very good architectural reasons. We don't care. You don't need that. We need the enclosure and the key mechanicals.
Yeah.
That's it.
So you're focusing the team.
Enclosure, key mechanicals, and that's when we say, and that goes to that 50, 100% thing. You can call it 50, but if it doesn't have enclosure mechanicals, I can't do nothing with it. So thank you for being specific. Are you guys?
I'm getting this, and I'm also I want to add, and just get feedback. How much of this would help if the design firms actually developed some PHPP in-house capacity? Because I find, I mean, I'm working in a different scale, but I want to know how this works in multifamily. If every architecture firm had one person in firm that knew enough about PHPP, who could do the tweaks and see what the impact is on the design in-house.
They're
Or-
too, they have too much on their plate.
Yeah, so,
To be an expert on this.
yeah,
I've gotten PHPPs from architects before, they wanna hand it off to us.
we have found, especially during those early days, we had lots of entrepreneur firms who'd send somebody to the, you know, Passivhaus Canada class so they could do the PhD. And then, you know, after one meeting, they realized they can't. And so they're then changing our contract dramatically. So it's a great point. Let me make this note. If your first time, get a professional to do your PHP. Don't have a newbie do your PHP, so just take the course. That's gonna make your life a nightmare. And if you've done this enough, that you're taking this in-house, like Cornerstone does, Perkins and Willow does, then you already know this, and you've got people who are doing it full-time, and you've got preferred certifiers, and this book is not giving you advice in this chapter.
I'll just give you examples. ZH, right, Stosh, he's a very experienced Passivhaus consultant, they took their first one in for 211. When they came to us for another bid after that, they're like, you just take it, it's just too much for us. So,
Okay, thanks, that's helpful. Yeah, no, because I was also thinking, how much in-house capacity should we train for, and what's realistic?
So let's make the note that this is written for beginning, but it should be your objective to be bringing more of this in-house over multiple passive houses. You're bringing in details, you're bringing in experience, you're hiring your own people. But even, and I'll say from our experience, RDH's experience, I'm no longer with RDH. From RDH's experience with Cornerstone, which had their own modeler for years, and with Perkins and Willow, which had their own modeler for years, we would still do a huge amount of it. Their modeler became almost like part of our team and pulling information for us, and sometimes would do a draft, or like especially with Big Scott, who just gets up at 3 in the morning, wants to try something. We always left the latest version, a copy of it, where he could get at it, because he would get up and just screw with it between 3 and 6 a.m. But we had a safety version backed up somewhere else, you know, because he just wanted to try stuff with this work. And an architect should do that. We want architects to do that. We want them to send us in the morning, see you idiots, if you had moved these windows and done this, this, and this, it all works, you know? And great, and then we'll review that and put it into PHPP. So I do think working with architects who are PHPP and or design PH sophisticated, and if we ever get a program for Revit, God, that would help.
Well, and I think I'll build on that, because I think to solve that issue, I think what has to be brought in-house is the feedback to the architect as they're drawing it in Revit or whatever, that like, oh, I shouldn't do that if I stretch my building 20% this way, ouch. That needs some kind of dashboard or something, you know, some feedback, ideally from PHPP. How that happens, I don't know, but you don't need an energy modeler to do that. You need an energy modeler and or the certifier to review what's coming out of that model and says, yeah, the underlying modeling looks good, but the architect's not driving the PHPP. They're getting feedback somehow.
And the best example we've had was Killian at Perkins Willow, right?
Yeah.
So Killian's really competent and has done a few on his own. He did the house in the valley on his own, you know? But Killian, better than anybody else, could see why we needed some details and was there in the office and could get those people to get that work done by the next day so that we could move it forward. He was our person on the floor who could pull things. And when we haven't even seen a flow problem, like I'm trying to talk about here, we'd see the flow problem first, because you know, so-and-so's about to go on vacation and so-and-so's also not gonna do it. And like, if you don't get this thing by Friday, you're fucked for a month. You know, and that's so useful. But you need someone who understands the PHP process and this whole process in the architecture firm to do that. And of course, that person is capable of doing basic PHP, but it's not the model. It's hard to get all the shit to put in the model. It's hard, right?
So I'm hearing from everybody, and I'm just wanting to make sure I'm capturing this, that actually having some person in-house that actually understands the
Yeah.
PHP modeling, they don't have to
They're
model
like
it,
a
but they
shepherd.
can create, yeah, they're kind of like the air boss on a job site, right? They're
Yeah.
the PHP boss.
Yeah, this is good.
Nice.
They're the champion, but
Yeah.
keep in mind that we, as practitioners, cannot force the architect to do that.
Yeah.
So
No, but
we are in a
Killian
better
can.
position
But
when we
Killian
have
can.
it.
Yeah.
Killian could, but we are in a better position if we have that champion on the other side. We are in a worse position if we don't have it.
And that's what this guide is for, is like saying, hey, this is gonna have to be better, easier,
Let's
faster,
call that
smarter.
person a shepherd until I figure out a bigger term. So over tonight's, whoever comes with the best term, I'll play here. Okay, let's move forward. I'm trying to be conscious of time without shutting down good conversation. So stop me if you need to. Okay, construction document phase. In my experience, this is where architects actually start working. So often, like, it was all fun and parties until then, and all of a sudden, like, holy fuck, in 10 weeks we have to have a plan. And it's then they start pouring the jets on, and we're finding, oh, that detail's changed, this has changed, this has moved around, and they're working fast and hard, and this becomes the hardest to coordinate. And as if that weren't enough, this is the same time we're trying to put together a design stage review model. And every day we're putting it together, they're changing something, and it's just a nightmare, right? So at least talk through the milestones and create clear things that work for that project. And I like what Lois has done. I've seen her proposals before about them, and I've seen yours in the past, I think what matters is that you agree on your Gantt chart. You could do it a few ways. There's not one absolute right way, but as long as you actually agree to it and you're gonna do it. So in this phase, the Passivhaus consultant is sending away plan specs, PHP to the building certifier. The problem is the architect is changing shit as fast as they send it. That's what you're trying to get out of, right? The certifier will typically respond with comments, questions, suggestions. Again, if you had a 10% PHP buffer, this is a huge thing I'm gonna say, and the architect then changes the detail, it's only a matter of percentage or two. And Andrew comes back and says, oh, you screwed up this, you screwed up that, but only ends up to 3-4%. If you had a good buffer, this is not a huge problem. It doesn't have to stop the project. It's just, you're working on it, you see it's there. If you didn't have a buffer, if you winded this right on the line, this is just gonna be kicking and screaming and crying for months. And so the buffer is everything through the imperfect communication. Does that make sense? And I don't know if I'm getting that. You need to get that in the manual, but the buffer is what saves you from fucked up communication. Has anybody ever had a project that didn't have fucked up communication? And so with a buffer, you're okay. You can breathe easy. It's not that all you do is when something comes in, Marine or Howard, quickly, you pull out the PHP, how much is it gonna matter? It matters a huge amount. I gotta call somebody right now. Or no, that's only 2%. Fuck, don't worry about it. We'll wait for the extra ones, That's it.
Monty, is this the same PHP as the one from the last slide, or is this a new one?
No, I've been unclear about that.
Uh-huh.
No, this is a new one. There's one, okay, here's what I'm proposing, and I'm open to other suggestions. There's the dummy version at the beginning charrette. There's nothing
Yeah,
real.
that.
There's a second version, the first version, we're going to look at it, kind of at the end of SD, beginning of DD, that's all real, but still some placeholders.
Mhm.
This is the one you're going to send for design stage review. You're getting closer to design stage review. You're starting to get pieces out there.
In terms of certification, I think one of the struggles will be here, like this in between DD and CD. Like, realistically, or at least in my experience, what you get as a certifier is a mix of DD and CD.
Yeah.
And then it's a bit hard. Like this is a very, very nice step-by-step one, but you're assuming that you have everything at the same time, at the same level of detail, and it's not something that happens. So I think I'm
agree.
not sure exactly how.
So that's where I posit, like having the certifier review before this stage, and say, okay, hey, you don't have those details, but hey, your assumptions are reasonable for thermal bridging. You've captured everything you need to in the model, or that's not going to matter, so don't worry about it. Like getting that feedback, and so to point Monty about like what's important, what's not. At that point in earlier design what's important, what's not, and then you can react accordingly. And then you gradually fill the details in later, but you're not going to come up with surprises.
For the sake of this discussion, I'm going to at chapter 9 where we talk about the 4 reviews. because I think I did it better there and I kind of fucked it up here. So let me talk about just the certifier perspective. Let me just find the chapter.
And Andrew, sorry,
And we
just
can get
to
more
keep them
specific,
so
we'll
all
come
is
back to
free
the
ESRs?
specs.
That's what we try to do. Yeah.
Yeah, free.
Yeah, I don't know, what do you guys do?
What's that?
Yeah.
But
We're
it,
on
again,
slide
it depends on how much you
2400
get from the teams.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I think free would be good and would make it smooth.
I mean, sometimes it depends if we get approached, like, at the end of DD, we're gonna have time for free, right? So this is the
You know
ideal
your
process,
starting point.
right?
Okay,
Yeah.
Yeah.
all right, to try to.
Waiting for the CD to get any feedback from the certifier is a
I haven't
recipe for
told you yet, Ken's
disaster.
gonna lock the door. Okay, let me try to put this out there, and we can keep taking feedback on it offline, but I do think we can move forward. So what I'm proposing is that phase one was that first dummy review, and I'll terminate it better, and I'll get a box of this up to that first chapter. I can't wait till chapter 9. Phase two, I call, and you can call something as a preliminary review. Actually, this came out of the NACC document that was put together. That, by the way, just where this came from, we want to change it, that's fine. So preliminary review, you know, it's end of SD, early DD, it's been updated, it has some real stuff in it. Then design stage review is, you know, mid to late CD, something like that, and design stage review is totally real, it's gotta be this. It's gotta be
I don't know about that, but because in my experience, especially for the projects that want to get funding, they need the design stage assurance there way before that. Or you delay the whole process.
Okay,
So I'll be
all right, so let's put that in, if you have funding deadlines or a city planning deadline, you can't get your construction permit, you know, you have to redo the Gantt chart. Again, I'm just saying, consider all these as you make your Gantt chart, I'm not saying this is exactly how it has to be. But yes, absolutely, the funding's there. Yeah, pre-submission guidance, let's see, which is that first dummy model, and you talked about some big picture things, preliminary review, design stage review, and then the post-construction assessment. Those are the four I'm talking about, and maybe we need to relabel, but I'll send this out, and maybe you can skip to chapter 9 and put more feedback in around this there, and I'll move some of this back up to chapter 1. I don't want to get too bogged down, although I agree in the importance of this, absolutely. But Lois has a point. And Lois is, I'll tell you the bar, somebody had totally fucked Lois on a presentation. She can tell you. She has good reason.
We pulled it out. You
pulled it out. Okay, so I'm going to go a little faster here, and we're going to recognize that I've done a poor job of communicating that and move forward. That's feedback.
When Monty, this is actually one of the most critical pieces, is understanding what to do when. So actually, I know you're probably off your time, but nailing this is really important. Even though it can't be nailed down because every project's different.
So would you agree on those 4 reviews as just?
You skip really quickly through it, so.
Okay. I apologize. I'll go back.
But in the actual document, there's like, we're on 1 page, so it's easier.
Which page is that?
It's on the first
231 of the slides? Is that slide? Yeah, which document?
The big one.
Hold on.
Document.
The actual document or the slides?
Which page is that?
The actual document,
Okay.
page 58, you have
58.
pre-submission guidance, preliminary review, design stage review, and post-construction assessment.
And this came out of our NACC document prepared a few years ago, and is online at the Passivhaus Network site. I was trying to be consistent there, and we can change that. But yes, I'm proposing for the certifier communication, pre-submission guidance. You're not actually going to run that first model by them. You might if you want to, but we're going to say how are we going to handle ventilation on a giant building? How are we going to deal with laundry? Depends on what the issues are. But I'm certainly pushing hiring the certifier early, having an early conversation about some of these things, and informing that model. So that's model 1 is very, very dummy down. Model 2, in my mind, and I'll open to changing this, is based on schematic design sign-off, as you said. The schematic design is done. We've got some real values. We probably know what they're going to pick for HRV in a window, whether they do or not yet, but we've got something we can get in there. It's enough that I would send this to the certifier, but I wouldn't urge them to spend 80 hours with it. You know, quick look, am I on track? It's not a formal review, it's an early check. What would you call that? Before you get your design stage review, what do you call that?
Well, we call these all design stage reviews.
Okay.
The formal, like, I don't call it formal, but it's like, here's a package I want you to review.
Yeah.
we could argue how much detail you need to go into if you've got some fundamental issues, but you're skimming over.
Do you have a
that
proposal
stay
that
in.
shows your process and what?
Yeah, I could show that.
Send me that and I'll try to incorporate some of that. And do you have a proposal you suggest?
I don't, but may I suggest that you look at the one from Passivhaus for the UK where they do the Riva overlay?
Okay, great. I haven't seen that. Yeah, will you send that to me? And
And actually, that's a good idea. So, you know, in the UK, RIBA is like the architectural stages. So I don't know if there's something in North America that has the same, you know, like how we call our phases and the overlay of Passivhaus.
architects here have to work with AIA rules, which are
Yeah.
very similar to the
To the
Ontario.
RIBA, yeah.
Yeah.
So we could work out of that, and I think that would be really nice because it's one thing to understand the milestones, it's another thing for them to put them in the schedule. So
But anybody reading this knows that. They know that process, and that's why I've kind of stuck to this form.
Yeah.
Okay, preliminary review, we can rename it, I don't care what we call it, to help me figure something out, some suggestions, but it's not, I don't call it design stage review, because I'm not asking for a letter. I'm asking for some feedback. 3 is design stage where I want the letter, I want this work, and I'm assuming there's some iteration here, back and forth between the two. I'm assuming this is happening during construction documents at best, because I've never managed to do it before construction documents. You know what, this is the second half of CDs, basically, when this is happening. And this is a really good point you make. Our projects have mostly tried to get the design stage review in order to apply for the construction permit, because in Vancouver, we can't apply for the building permit until we have a DSR letter. And so the DSR letter is hanging us up. It's a great place for the certifier to make sure they're getting paid. You know, like, it's like everything's gotta happen. But you're right, we did work on a project in Connecticut that needed some assurance early. It wasn't a full design stage review. It was based on an earlier model, and we didn't call it a design stage review, but we filled out their form and said, our review says this will build if it's meet to these specs and these plans. So I think we need a note, and I'll write a sidebar box that says, you know, change your Gantt chart around your financing needs. I think it might have been a FIAS project. I think we wiggled around the term of what we called it, but we just wrote what we've done. We said, this we've done, this we're here, we believe in this. And the big thing I'm trying to get across to newbies at this is, don't fight this process. This is the process that makes your life easy. Like, once you have that DSR letter, everybody can breathe easy. Like, then the architect's risk is almost gone at that point. You know, it's like, then you just have to build it.
That underline is completed. The number of projects we've had where that doesn't get complete,
Yeah.
and then we get post-construction, and you're like, you haven't even looked at our comments from the review or something?
I
That's
think, and
important.
this would be my advice to policymakers, and I'll just stick this in, is like, policymakers should act for a DSR at an appropriate time. And what was deemed in Vancouver appropriate was you could do the concrete non-Passivhaus construction, but you couldn't start the first habitable level until you had a DSR. And it takes long enough to dig a hole and pour concrete, but even if you've waited, you can go really fast there, and you've got 6 or 8 weeks to finish things. And if there's any other policy,
Because they don't know how to do it currently for their own process.
there's that.
So we'll find
Anything
that
else
out.
on the process? I'm sorry this is out of order, but I appreciate feedback. And it's in the guide. Send me your proposals. I'll come up with a center pace one, and I'll run it back past both of you, and others want to be on that loop.
There might be just it'd be in between 3 and 4 during construction, if there are changes to
Yeah.
consult the certifier.
Yep, it's in there. It'll be, yes, it's in the notes. It's not that we've covered so far, but absolutely. I'm gonna add a chapter specifically on construction reviews that I don't know why I didn't think of earlier. Anybody else find
Just
it?
quick, sorry, riff
Yeah.
on that. So, from a policymaker's perspective, we need to ask them to get the preliminary design review at entitlement, not at building permit. So at design review phase and not at
Maybe we
permit.
need to give that a really formal name, but yeah, that is what we're saying.
Is that what we're saying here?
It seems like every jurisdiction has what's entitlement.
Well, the design review approval and not at building permit. There's usually a
It's over here.
bifurcation of those two. There's the design review approval.
But planning
and
and
then there's
zoning.
Sorry, but
We're
who?
talking planning and zoning.
Exactly.
Yeah, oh, yeah, planning and okay, yeah. So but that
That's when you want the design review.
Yes.
Well, there's-
For
but
now,
there's-
for the notes, let's do that, yes.
well, yeah,
I
I
understand.
think what we call site plan approval. There's zoning review, which could be just like the form of the building that can take yours or whatever, and then there's the site plan approval where you got more detail. But it seems like there's different language that we
Yeah,
use.
every city.
I can rewrite to this, but the thing is, ask the certifier to say specifically what they did. We reviewed this based on this plan set and these documents and these information, and if this happens in this way, this building will have the potential to certify, would be the furthest one, or the later one said, yes, I will certify this building. That's two statements. This could certify, or I will certify, are two very different statements. I'm happy to deliver the first one based on that early phase. You and I will work on the language later. I totally hear your point. I'm gonna all this past you again. Let's move on. Okay, you guys know this, 3 rounds not uncommon. Some jurisdictions, just what we were talking about, this is driving accelerated deadlines. We just covered that. So this is where we start multitasking in the Gantt chart. So while the thing's out at the certifier, like the certifier's got 6 weeks with us for the design stage review or whatever it turns out to be, then it's time for the kind of local team to pivot and start talking to the constructors. Like we're kind of planning ahead to the next phase. And so it could still happen during construction documents that you're starting to talk to your builder about training and those other pieces. If they don't start their training during CD, they're not gonna have it done by the time they're building.
I think there might need to be a branch here, different approaches, because some won't have hired the builder by then. Maybe they have a consultant to help, like a
Good point.
builder.
Good point.
And so there's a whole like separate tender stage, and then there's like contract documents. So those do need to be
You're right.
distinguished.
Designated branch and Bronner was, let me add a paragraph or a box earlier about the value of hiring a builder earlier, or at least a builder's rep, or a pre-contract or something. There's ways to get around this, but you're right.
Hold on, hang on, I'm trying to find.
You either want to hire the builder or a builder's rep, or a person who's going to function as a kind of builder's advisor at SD or before. And there's different ways they contract it depending on how the final contract might go. And I'm not going to get into contracting in this book, or the book will be 1,000 pages.
But there could be some key things about like to have a tender stage, if that's the process, to talk about that's relevant, like training for the builder and stuff.
All I'm saying here is that at this stage, somewhere in CD, if you have a builder or you're on close to a builder, the builder's going to be doing some training. You need to figure out who the air supervisor or Passivhaus coach is going to be and start talking to that person. They need to be in the process from here on out. I describe this as a good communicator as much as anything else. The Passivhaus air barrier person has to be someone who can quickly figure out who needs to be called attention to something, with a cell phone picture on site. And they're not going to keep secrets back. They're not going to be afraid of stepping on toes. They're just going to communicate. Is this a problem or not? It's not. Right, off we go. I'm strongly pushing for air barrier supervised Passivhaus coaches, if they haven't done it before, that they don't just do training, that you actually send them to another project, they spend time on other sites. This is a rising star in your construction company. Send them out to, with some other terms, to shadow other people and just spend time on other sites, and then they'll learn the job that way. Because that's, send this person out to suffer from Kevin Brennan for 3 days, and they'll be great. Or something like that. That this job involves daily site walks, some impromptu training, like you have a new person who has to take windows, and you gotta just train them then that day. They missed the other training. And they're coordinating site visits among other professionals. If anybody has a job description for this, I'm looking at you because I think you do. Can you share
I'd
it?
have to dig. I'm not 100% sure, Monty. I'll have a look.
Andrew, do you have a job description for
Probably like in specs or something.
Yeah, if anybody has one, send me one. We'll anonymize it. Happy to do that. I'd like to put a job description in this book saying this is more or less what you're hiring to for this role. And then the other conversation I really want to have at construction documents is what's our value engineering process for this building? Who's going to do what in what order? It's not just something that's going to magically happen later. It's got to be somebody hired to do something with some materials and plans. And I want to have that conversation so we can get the value engineering person focused on, I can't fuck around too much with window specs and HRV specs, but I can go nuts on drywall and everything else. Like there's things that matter and things that don't. And what we've seen, especially in first-time projects, is every bidder thinks because it says Passivhaus, they can raise their bid by 15 or 20%. And it's just not true. It's just not how it's going to work. And they try to get away with it. They think, oh, it's Passivhaus, I'm going to spend 10% extra. I'm going to get my 10%. So it's really important that the bidding pieces and the value pieces are understanding what matters and what doesn't. They don't have to understand the whole process. They just have to understand, what's there and who needs to know. Of our early single families, our early multifamily projects, several went off the rails at first. That's where they went wrong. Everybody was doing everything right. The purchasing just went out somewhere else, and they believed they were saving the project money. They were trying to do the right thing. They weren't trying to F the project, but they did. And I won't go into all those stories now. You probably each have some. A screw story of Oregon pulling the screws back up. There's some great ones over the years, you know. Yeah, you right there. So, if you have good examples of that, show it.
Do you want to do horror shows and like maybe org success stories? Like,
Yeah,
it
that's
would be
both.
nice, like.
Yeah.
Balance, that's right. Yeah, right.
Something to add, another kind of, it's the industry-wide thing that'd be good is standardized specs, specifications for projects, so architects can just incorporate them into their specs.
Do you have another 2 hours, Andrew?
It's for what?
Yeah.
To chat about
No,
this?
not to talk about it, but as a note, like that needs to be addressed, right?
There are architecture firms who have very strong feelings about how they do specs. Let's get on another conversation.
Yeah. Monty, one more thing under your air barrier supervisor, you want staff retention, because we've had all of this
Yeah,
before.
second, yeah.
We've got
Aaron
staff
is fair.
retention and it's been a nightmare.
Aaron is fair.
So I have a question. Who is the person on site calling?
Well, that's what I mean, this coordination. So,
Who is that? Who's on the other side of the phone?
You're gonna work it out, and this is what,
Who's designated to
this
do
is
that?
super important, yeah, and this is what about this coordination, so they might call the enclosure consultant, you know, they might call the Passivhaus consultant, they certainly should include the architect, if the architect should never be out of the loop of the conversation, you know, but don't have to be running down for everything. The arbory boss should have enough sense of who to call and who the chain of command is, and it's different on every project. On some projects, you know, the Passivhaus consultant is kind of second to enclosure and mechanical, and other times they really lead and mechanical follows them. And in reality, there's a degree of personalities and who engages and who's contracted enough hours for these calls, you know? So it changes on every project we've been on. If you always have a template that works for every goddamn project, tell me what it is.
Oh no, it's a disaster.
Yeah.
Sometimes no one will, they're like, you're the Passivhaus consultant, we're not doing any of this. Sometimes somebody's dedicated on the crew, they're necessarily called the area boss. It's all over the map, and sometimes installation gets installed and covered up and we don't get to see it. So
Yeah.
then they have to
So-
do their little declaration, yes, we built it.
And maybe we need to move this up. We had this at bid phase, and the next phase is that we just iron out that question. This is a key milestone, and maybe it needs to move, but we iron out those procedures. And we suggest a specific meeting on this, and I'm open to where this should be, what you call it, but, you know, the design team, the construction team, and the key subtrades all need to be there. Ventilation commissioner, air barrier tester ought to be at that meeting. That you're gonna go through the Passivhaus documentations requirements, so people just understand what the certifier's expecting in broad terms. If there's any meeting I try to bring the certifier to, it's this one. You know, if they can make it at least by Zoom. And then the question, who will inspect what and where? And you know, the architect is gonna have inspections, the enclosure inspections, mechanical is gonna have inspections, you might have a facade designer, there's lots of other things that might be in that list. When will site visit reports and where will they be? Can I see everybody's site visit reports on one website? Do I have to go to 17 websites, each with their own password, to see whether or not Lois's team did site visit report this week? You know, so where's that all gonna be files for the certifier? If you get this organized during construction, certification's easy. Because the certifier A can peek in if he or she wants to, and B, at the end they can find it all in one place. Otherwise, you've got to spend time at the end putting it all together. And then to the answer you were asking, Andrew, number 2, what's the procedure for flagging a problem? And ideally, the air boss flags it, or somebody flags it to the air boss, but sometimes other people do. And then once it's brought forward, what's the process? And I have worked with architecture firms who are saying, never ever cut us out. We don't care how minor it is, you do not have a communication without including us. There's architecture firms who work that way, and I respect that 100%. There's other architecture firms like, this is our scope, don't fuck with us, that's your scope. And you just have to know how they want to work. It also becomes a real problem on larger projects because so often this is sub-trades. You know, there was like a trade to do the enclosure, they hired somebody to do installation, somebody else to do air barrier, and somebody else to install the windows, and only the air boss knows even who did what. I'm like, I don't know. So there's my point is have a meeting, work this out. But I don't believe I've ever seen 2 projects that work exactly the same, even when it's the same architecture firm and the same builder.
Monte, do you have, in the process part, ever do your air barrier review and call, we call this out, after we do the air barrier review in DD, we then sit down with whose trade is paying to do what, and
Yep.
attach what to what. Because we found this was a problem early on when we started, so
Yep.
that's part of our air barrier review and call it the charrette, right after the
Yeah.
air barrier,
Yeah.
when you get back together with the team and be like, what's happening here and here.
Yeah. So I have to listen on this because my experience is warped because what we did at RDH was we were the enclosure consultants and the Passivhaus consultants. So it's all in-house, and so we had all these site reviews by enclosure consultants, but they were all trained to look at Passivhaus issues as well.
We have that too.
Yeah, so where you have the enclosure consultant, Passivhaus consultant on the same company, it's really clean. Where they're not, it's harder. And
But
so
still, the
trust.
proper time, QA/QC starts in DD.
Yeah.
Okay,
See,
great.
that's a great
That's
note.
the
Yeah,
point.
great, okay, yeah,
QA/QC
yeah.
starts
Right.
during design
Right.
development, right? It doesn't start in construction.
All caps there, yeah, we gotta get this up, you're right, you're
Yeah.
totally right, thank you, yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna go back a little bit, because I wanna pick up a couple things, but you're right, I should have started that way early. Okay, talk about this. Now, the other thing I'm trying to communicate in the book, and it's the best practice for us when we do it, you have the SD starts with a big meeting, the charrette, and bidding phase, which is really construction, starts with a big meeting, the construction kickoff. You know, like they're just wrapping up the bidding, the people have been hired, everybody's there, maybe it has to be in construction. You tell me when it has to be, I don't care about that. But there's another meeting that's just as important as the initial charrette, and I want you all to hype in on this, but let me just get through this piece. So it's led by at least the Passivhaus consultant, the air barrier supervisor, has been figured out by them, and you're kind of introducing this woman or man to everybody, and the enclosure engineer to the degree you have one. Some architects want to be right there, some in center, some are like, don't bother us, do it. It's their call, it's their show. It is really smart though for the developer and the architect and the design team to attend, because they send the signal, especially if the developer, the suit wearing developer, the mega guy or woman shows up, it sends the message to everybody else, we care, this matters, we're watching, you know. All construction team employees, and that includes sub-trades who are touching the air barrier or installation, other things have to be there, and this is what we always get fight on. You know, we haven't even hired the sub-trades yet. Well, then hire the fucking sub-trades, it's gonna start working in a few weeks, you know? But if there's sub-trades who's doing it is not at the charrette or the kickoff, you don't get the benefit of it. You really think the air boss is gonna tell the boss of the sub-trade that hasn't been hired in yet everything they need to know? And this from, you know, my 18-year-old is like hammering me at the houses these days, and I hear what he's been told. That we like to demonstrate techniques specific to the project. They don't need to know how to install any window, they can install windows on this building, the way we're gonna do it. They don't need to know all the things, but how we do it. We like to show pictures of projects that failed. At Sherman at RDH, and I'm sure you're doing the same thing, Maureen, has built this slide deck of really fuck-ups, some from ours, some from others. If you have some you can share, we don't want to be too negative, we put it in appendices. But we find that builders are visual learners. They just see things once wrong, they laugh. As soon as you hear the laughter, you can go to the next one. They got it. Like that, yes, that was patently stupid. I got it, move on. We can do what I'm doing now, talk endlessly, and they will not get it. But as soon as they see the picture, they get it. And then after them seeing the failed, we'd like to go straight to the mock-ups. Great, now show us how to do it right. You also fucking smart. Okay, you do that. And then you've got a lot of time in the mock-ups for people to put in and take out a window, put things to take out, put it back. And you keep those mock-ups around because you have all the turnover we was talking about. You know? If you have new people come in, they can keep playing with the mock-ups, they can keep messing around with them. And this is the other thing I keep saying, and if you can think of a better way to say it, let me know, but I keep saying, this full day is gonna be expensive, but it's cost less than one good change order. One change order pays for this. How many change orders on the last project you signed? What did it do to your construction budget? Like, we all know there's, you know, often multi-million-dollar numbers, right? This pays for itself by avoiding one change order. It absolutely will pay for itself. And we really need the developer, the architect to go table on it. Yeah.
I would add, because our single most challenging thing is airtight, leaky ducts and not being able to commission ventilation systems. Worse problem than actually envelope issues.
Yeah.
That whether it's at I would encourage it this one, but it could be separate, yes. But mechanical folks, ventilation commissioning should be at this type of meeting as well.
I mentioned that mechanical chapter, but yes, added here too. And let's say we're on either mechanical people are here, or we have a separate one for mechanical. I don't really care, but you're right. We've had more projects go sideways. They're all focused on the air barrier. Nobody thinks about ventilation commissioning. Okay, we've been through some of this. Yes, it's all gonna move up. Some other key milestones, just that it's happening. You should have a daily walk around with the air barrier supervisor. They should be looking for stuff, you know? If your air barrier supervisor is the kind of person who just takes a picture with a cell phone and sends it to either the enclosure engineer, the Passivhaus consultant, or whatever person is, it says, is this okay? And look at it, you can usually tell from the photo, yeah, that's fine, or no, that's a problem. And maybe it's a problem that merits me going to site, or maybe it's a problem that just merits a conversation on the phone, but you can solve a lot if you get on it right away. Site visits by the architect, what are they doing, how often are they going, how's that share? We kind of covered this on the other basis, you know, how is this being done? I think I've got this in here, yeah. That's what you're saying, Andrew. My favorite, okay, I'm gonna tell one more story, I'll pay for it later, but we had this one project that may win a design award here, in fact, where the contractor was claiming insulating the pipes to PHI specs was gonna cost $20,000. It's a 6-story building, it's not that huge. And I'm sitting there, and I had the pipe links, you know, in the PhD piece. During the meeting, I pulled the pipe links, pulled out the installation cost, I think the labor. I knew my kids' spring break was coming up, and so I said, look, my kids are coming up on spring break soon. I will do this for $50,000. I will have it done this week, you know, and I'll have it done this week, and I'll stand by it and guarantee the results. Free $50,000. And at which point, the developer turns to the developer and says, maybe we should price that again. If he thinks his kids can do it in a week, like, maybe we're not really thinking this through. But just that you're working through these things really well, and I welcome stories and photos through this whole thing.
Yeah, and again, you might cover it in detail, just going back to the integrating mid-construction air barrier testing, just the sequencing and scheduling of that, of like,
Right.
So I don't know if you've addressed it anywhere, but definitely want to address it.
Sequencing, yeah, good point. Sequencing of the mechanical reviews for insulation and duct air tightness, and then HRV air tightness, and then HRV balancing, and then all the local balance. There's a dance to all that. Yeah.
Martin and Brian, will you send us a list of the asks, like just so we don't have to go through that? For all of the, does anyone have photos of this, or anyone, just, you know?
I'm keeping a good
Ron was keeping the best notes she
I'm
can.
scrambling
Let's do
to
this.
keep
Let's
notes.
do it.
No, like, see the ones that
No, she said just
Monty's
pull them
pulling
out of
out
the
here,
Yeah.
the photos are there, can you give it to us? Yeah, he has
Yeah.
a lot of them
Yeah.
in the.
Yeah.
Okay, Monty's gotta do that?
Yeah, you'll forward the notes to me. I will go through the notes and flush them out a bit.
Sorry.
I'm also video, I'm videoing the whole thing.
You want to get it?
No,
We're not getting
So
paid.
lavishly.
Believe me, I'm not either.
Okay, let's do this. I'm just trying to find full time. Ron is gonna do the best she can, send it to me. I will review them, maybe Roy can help me review them against the tape. I will then send tidied up notes of what we've talked about here to each of you who want them, and you can look at those tidied up notes and get back to me.
And warning on time.
Yeah.
As the room monitored, when do we take a break?
Yeah, let's take a break.
Okay.
You know what, let's just do it now. We can, yeah, this is the time. Let's take a 5-10 minute, whatever break.
Slide 26.